kids, welcome to another episode of GLEN YAPS. We remain in the sound studio here, enjoying the lockdown, because when I'm not locked down, music is all I care about. So thanks for watching a couple of the previous videos that I posted. A couple of questions from the last video, which is about some of the gear that I use to do recording and kind of the process I went through. They asked about the studio itself and what I did to soundproof it. So if you look around, I'm just giving you a quick scan here. I have a lot of stuff in a small area. And I'm going to give you a shot of the ceiling. And these stairs. Okay. The problem I have, or had, is my basement has two halves, but the house is a split level, meaning half the house goes up 3 steps and the other part of the house is ground level. So the basement on the other side is just enough for me to stand there grazing my head on the beams going across. So for a full studio, that wouldn't work. My band practices over there. The guys can stand, they just, they either, it's not a fixed ceiling, so you have to stand kind of between the beams if you don't want to get a concussion, or they sit down, so, which is no biggie, it's a rehearsal. But for a studio, that's no good. Although the drums sound amazing over there, because I've done drum along videos, and it sounds great over there, just acoustically. So at some point I would like to do some recording with drums on that side, just throw a microphone snake over there and go through my different kits. But anyways, irrelevant to that. So I'm stuck with the other half of the basement, which is full height. Where you see this door here, there's actually another 12 feet on the other side of this. Now I could have went the full distance, but that is storage area, and I needed storage area. And on the other side of the door, there's also another hallway and stairs going back upstairs. There's 2 ways to get upstairs. So it just wasn't logical to go that way and lose my storage space. So we gutted the basement. It was an apartment down here. It was just like a single college student apartment for when we bought the house. We weren't going to rent, so anyways, we used it as it was for years. It had a washroom. In fact, you can see the plumbing pipes here. That's from our washroom upstairs, and there was a washroom here, and it all connected. Now I could have boxed all that in and whatever. I go, it's a recording studio. We're not up for being pretty. Besides, there's a window there. The more I box in the pipe, the less exit I have in case of a fire. The front window, as you can see, is large. And follows the fire rules to escape. So we gutted it. We took everything out, top to bottom. Found a couple of surprises that I didn't like. Could have had a house fire with some of the wiring I found, but we had changed the wiring in the entire house except for this one area of this apartment. So we gutted it. Now I'll say that the walls are totally insulated with Roxol insulation, and it's the type that's for soundproofing. A lot of people that have basement apartments and that will put it in the rafters to soundproof for the tenants upstairs. The stuff works great. It was easy to install. It's not like that pink insulation crap. This stuff holds its shape. So the walls are all insulated with it everywhere, except behind this door. That's a door to utilities and more storage. And the reason why it's so short is the main support beams of the house are right here. So there's no way, because it's split level. You can see where my stair angle is. That's the stairs upstairs going down the 3 steps. So there's no way I could get around it. So everything is insulated in the walls. Now in the ceiling looks like tile, like regular tile that you'd see in an office, but it's actually insulated rubber tile. When you touch the tile, it's rubbery. It's very cool. Again, soundproofing. Beyond that, in between the rafters, more Roxol insulation. This room is definitely soundproof. The only thing I built a box around was this. This is actually the piping for the house, for the vents. I boxed that in. And I haven't had any issues with it, with how you say, rattling or anything like that. I do have a heating vent in there to heat the room. There's 2 heating vents in here. I don't have a cold return. I bypass that and put it on the other side of the basement. I want the room to always be warm for my guitars and instruments, no matter what. So, and it has worked that way. We also rewired, my wife and I rewired the entire basement. So right now there is a socket at almost, let's see, 1, 2, I think what we did was, well, there's definitely 1, 2, 3, there's 4 on the wall right here behind the console. There are 2 behind the drums, and every wall has one. That far wall even has one, so I can run my keyboards in there. And behind the amp, there's actually one also there, and down on the far side. Yes, so we wired the house to suit a studio. When I first fired up the studio after it was all done, I had a buzz, and I was like, I can't have a buzz. It's impossible to have a buzz after what I did with the wiring. And here I tracked it down to, when I turned on my rig, one of the power amps was fried in one of my receivers, which I wasn't using anyways except to play regular music through. So once I got that out of the chain, it was like, thank goodness it's quiet. And right now it's like super quiet and the rig is fully up. The only thing you hear is a little bit of the computer fan motor, which you don't hear that in the recordings anyways. Okay, so that answers the question for the studio. Oh, the floor. I forgot to tell you. The floor, the floor is built on 2x4s, but it's floating. I have it on small little, I don't know what you call them. I forget the name of them. But anyways, the 2x4s are above. So the whole frame of the floor is floating off the concrete, just a hair. And in between the boards, the framing of the floor, we have insulation. We have Roxol soundproofing insulation. So this floor, when you stomp on it, there's no echoey noises. What I did though is all the insulation itself I put in bags. So think of it as giant pillows of insulation. So if the basement does flood, for whatever reason, God forbid, those Roxol insulation, which are not cheap, are all in little plastic pillows. I shouldn't say little; they're big. They go between the floor joists and the full length. So they'll be safe. I can take them out, and I won't have to redo the Roxol factor. So the floor, ceiling, everything is super soundproof. So I don't have any problems with bleed from the outside world. So So that answers that question about the studio. Now I got another one about drums. Now there's lots of ways to record drums. There's minimal with like 3 mics, like the Led Zeppelin thing. I've done all that with the advantage of having this door open and a hallway and a flight of stairs. You put a microphone up there, you can get a huge bottom sound if you want it. My thing is, every song should have a different drum sound to basically suit the song. That's why I flip out drum sets for recordings. I use this tiny little tie kit. Tie is a manufacturer. It's been around for a little bit, but they make this Go kit that's really small, pancake style drums. They record phenomenal. I've used those in a lot of recordings. The tom sound is just absolutely killer. So other people, they use MIDI and substitute drum sounds by professionals. So it's like you can get a snare sound file, and with MIDI you can trigger it. So you're really playing a synthetic kit triggering real drum sounds. Now that's fine and dandy, and it probably saves you a lot of grief, but I'm a drummer, and that for me is stupid. If you run into a problem, you have to trigger a sound. Okay, I can see it as a last resort. Me personally, I didn't spend all this money on this drum set to have it sit here, not be recorded, spend another $3,000 on a top of the line electronic kit, and then trigger sounds. That is just stupid to me, and I will not do it. The other thing is, I want my drums to sound like my drums. I don't want them to sound like cannons. I don't want them to sound like something they are not. I've just heard so many drum sounds, it's like, drums don't sound like that. If you're standing beside a drum set, they don't sound like that. So my taste, I favor the jazz and rock players from the 60s. Sure, fine-tuned from that point, because a lot of those people used just a single mic on a kick, and then let it bleed into the room mics that were recording something else at the time. So, but I want a more natural sound, we'll say. With my drum set, my big drum set, everything is mic'd individually. So one mic on everything. So that way I have at least control of the volume and the EQing on each individual piece. Now the kick drum is different. I want to be able to have, because the kick drum and the snare are really the loudest thing. So even with the snare drum has a mic on top and one on the bottom. I found recording the snare, having a snare on both, or a microphone on the top and bottom, is you get some of the snare buzz rattle. Because without it, sometimes, believe it or not, the snare can actually sound like a tom. It's the one mic does not pick up the snare buzz. That's why they call it a snare. It's different than the rest of the drums. So I do have a mic on the bottom of that, and you have to experiment with phasing on the microphones, because sometimes when the two mics are so close together, they will go out of phase and you won't get a full natural sound. Now some soundboards, some software have a phasing button. Experiment with that. You might be surprised. You're going, well, I can't get the sound I'm wanting. Why? Because one mic by itself is great. When I add the other mic, it seems to just take away. It's a phasing issue, most likely. So experiment with that. Learn about phasing of microphones. The same thing I learned the hard way with overhead microphones. I used to just put like 2 mics just to get my cymbals, and they weren't proper overhead mics. And I got some good recordings, but I wasn't paying attention to phasing issues between the 2 overhead mics that I've used on and off throughout my years. It all relates to the snare drum. You want equal measurement to each overhead mic. You want the same measurement. So if you see the 2 mics above the drums here, they are the same distance to the center of the snare with a measuring tape. Same distance. Now, I've been experimenting with these. I wish I had higher ceilings to get them further away because these mics are super sensitive. I've experimented with them in this area, and I want to try them out more, but I also want to try them further back near the back wall. Gavin Harrison, drummer for Porcupine Tree and now King Crimson, he's experimented with that, and so I might try that because, hey, it doesn't cost you anything to play around with it in your own studio. For the kick drums, I use 3 microphones on each kick. One is for the internal clicking sound of the beater. One is at the hole on the side of the bass drum, out maybe 3 inches, maybe 2 inches there. There's one going in, there's one there. And this is a sub kick that gets a low frequency. It's like a giant speaker turned into a microphone. And I run that into a direct box. This here, I made myself with just old drum parts, old speakers, and wiring. And it works great. I love it. I have the same for this side. Right now, this is all apart. I'm using the mics and stuff for something else, so it's just off the kit right now. But for the project I'm doing for a friend, I just need single kick. Sometimes I'll put a cheater beater on the single kick and just work it like that. I have the room and the pedals to do it. Bass drums, another issue. If you run double bass, you can have phasing issues also with the microphones in close proximity. That's why I try and keep the mics at the farthest of the bass drums rather than the closest, because you do get phasing issues. Again, you can work with a phasing button on your mixer or in your software. So I've been asked about acoustic guitars and how to mic them. Well, acoustic guitars, like drums, are a pain in the butt to get right. And what you do once may not work right the second time. It also depends on the song. I'll be honest, I have not perfected the acoustic guitar thing. My friend Tony and I, we've written a lot of songs and recorded a lot of songs, and we've experimented with microphones in front of the hole on the acoustic. We've ran acoustics with pickups along with the microphones. I picked up a couple extra microphones like Rhodes and a couple other ones, and I'm experimenting with that. I've also got these clip-on mics, pretty expensive clip-on mics that clip into the hole, and I'm going to try and get a sound that hits my ears nicely. But I'll be honest, the acoustic guitar is a tough battle. And we've come close on a couple occasions, but when we used the same technique in another song, it didn't work. It just didn't sound right. Now, a lot of this acoustic experiment that my buddy and I did was pre this studio rebuild. So we may be able to try those techniques again and work on it and perfect it. I'm still experimenting with it, and I've gotten way better results, but still need some work. Bass guitar. Well, I'll be honest. I've tried running direct. I absolutely hate running bass direct. I don't know what it is. There's just it's okay, but I just find to bring it out in the mix, for whatever reason, I need to give it a lot of TLC. So the best way to do bass that I have found, and this goes back to experience with the bass player George Ravlich, friend of mine. We did a lot of recording, and in the studio he ran direct. He mic'd the big speaker. He mic'd the horn on the cab if you have one. If you have two sizes of speakers, mic each size of speaker. So with me, my rig back there is a Galen Kruger RB400, I think it is. I forget. It's been a long time since I looked at the title of it. The bass cabinet is an SWR 8x8, so it's got 8-inch speakers, the smallest bass speakers I think made. And it's got a Galen or David Eden preamp. Now there's a couple ways you can go there. The Galen Kruger has a direct out, so you can run the Galen Kruger straight out, mic the horn, mic the 8-inch speaker. It sounds great. I mean, it's a lot of extra tracks. It's 3 tracks, sometimes 4 tracks. But you have the option of dialing in each one of the frequencies from the horn, the speaker, the direct sound. And you want that because you may not use all 3, but you have that option to engage them if you do. All right, that's key. It's not that you use all 3, but it's nothing to set up 3 devices to get your sound, run it into 3 tracks, and choose and sit there and have a choice rather than go, the song is almost done, the recording, why didn't I do that? And I've learned that, especially for the kick drum. I have been plagued with a couple of issues with 2 songs that I recorded a long time ago where the kick drum sound is not good. And so you really have to work your ass off to get it to sound good. So I learned to multi-mic kick drums. Kick drums are the key in a lot of recordings. Learn the 3 mics, and then you've got it covered. As for room mics, my studio is so skinny, like you can tell it's skinny. Like this drum set is massive, obviously, so it takes up a lot of real estate. I forget the actual measurements, but anyways, so room mics. Okay, this one here is usually I use for room mic. This is also my vocal mic, but it makes a great room mic too. This is a Rode mic, and I have another one there. So I like having 2 different mics, so one in one corner, one in the other. I don't have the room for running a beautiful stereo style room system. I found when I experimented with just 2 matching mics, I couldn't get them far enough away to stop phasing issues. So I went with 2 drastically different mics and just run them more mono than stereo. So, and it works great. I'm totally happy with the results because the overheads decipher, and the rooms only has a little bit in the mix anyways, but the overheads, they're in stereo, and it works fine for me. It might be taboo to other people, but that's all from experimenting. For guitars, I usually mic the amps with 2 mics, 2 different microphones. So I will mic it with the Sennheiser. It's a old school 421. It's got a frequency roll off on it. As you can see, I got one on the kick drum there. That's old school. I just love those mics. So I run two. There's 4 speakers in this particular one. There's 1 speaker in the rest of them. So 4 in here. So I would put 1 on that speaker and then another one down there to the floor, but a different mic. I want 2 different mics. I want 2 different sounds. Now again, you have to watch for phasing. Again, research phasing, because I've got caught on that when I first started many times. Phasing is definitely a gremlin in recording. So guitar stuff, I'd never want the same guitar sound for every song. In fact, most of my originals are all different sounds. They're different amps. I switch out amps like socks. I have a bunch of amps. I bought them earlier on, and I like all different kind of sounds. I've got 1 or 2 solid state. The rest are all tubes. I have quite a few tube amps, all different years and vintages. I want variety. I just don't want the same sound. I know in the 80s it was every guy had their sound, and that's fantastic. That's their trademark. Glenn Thomas is not looking for a trademark, so I'm looking just to make a sound on a recording. Now I spend a lot of time getting the sounds that I want, but they're all different. Same with drum sounds, always different. The bass sound, same thing. I've got 3 or 4 basses, semi-acoustic bass, so all different. So now, one of the issues I've come across that is a haunting thing, it drives me nuts. I'm just going to turn on my software here, is frequencies that all fight for the same space. Now that means like the kick drum frequencies, sometimes your bass player is in your frequency area with their sound. Everybody has their own sound where they EQ it. Some like more bass, some like less bass on their bass guitar, or even on your acoustic. Some like it more trebly, some like it more thuddy. All that comes down to your final mix. Okay, so I'm going to show you something here. I'm just going to use an EQ here. I'm going on my screen, so if I'm looking like I'm losing my mind, that's why I'm looking at a screen while I'm talking to you. Okay, so let's go with well, I'm just going to go on this keyboard track, and I'm just going to add an EQ. Okay, I'm just going to add where's my new EQ? I like this EQ. Okay, so this is an EQ. Now, one thing to notice with this, it has presets, okay? So you can choose what you want. Now, let's understand something here. Just because they have a preset doesn't mean it's going to suit your situation, okay? It's a starting point, and then you can adjust from there, okay? Don't get screwed up thinking, they've got it covered. There's the bass EQ. Not going to match your situation, not going to match every song. So, what I want to do is, I want you to look at the bass frequencies. So I'm going to hit the bass. Now this is their idea of bass, okay? And I have never had luck with their setup here. I find the bass gets rumbly still, even though you've got roll off here. Okay, you see roll off down where the cursor, my computer cursor is. There's roll off here, so that's getting rid of some of the rumble. Understand The kick drum range is in here. Your bass drum for your drummer is right in this area. So these two frequencies are already going to start to have issues. Also, a lot of this frequency is sucked out of the bass. Sometimes, like even with funk playing, this is boosted a bit. And believe it or not, it actually cuts through better if you boost it a little bit there. Don't go crazy with anything. Small amounts make a difference. Now I'm going to show you the kick drum. Okay, so there's the bass. There's the kick drum. Now I'm going to go back to the bass. Here, I'm going to go over this way here. There's the kick drum. There's the bass. They share space. All right? So, the fight of what gets heard, that has been a major issue with me in my earlier years of recording before I started researching it a lot. And the odd song that I recorded, I'm doing an album right now with a friend that's basically done, and we're just tweaking things. We started some of these songs 10 years ago, so my gear is different, recording style is different, mics are different, the recording studio is totally revamped. I wish I could go back and redo those songs, but I have new songs I want to move on to, so we're not revisiting the dead to bring them back to life. So we're making the best of some of these. I think there's a couple of old recordings. So the bass guitar and the kick drum fight in those areas. So it took me a while to figure out how to get around that. And quite honestly, it's by sucking certain frequencies individually down for the bass or down for the kick drum and giving that space to the opposite instrument. That takes practice, 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 and it will frustrate the living shit out of you, because it has for me, has for many on the internet, in these forums that I've been on. So it's experimental. You just have to go frequency by frequency and find out what can give and take to make both instruments shine through. All right. Now let's look at the acoustics. And well, this is guitar in general. Okay. So in this preset, you can see again, acoustic or electric guitar is sharing the same frequencies. So between the 50 and 100 range on an EQ, you now have three instruments fighting for territory. Now the problem, a guitar and a bass live in a spectrum of other frequencies. A bass drum does not. You can't boost too many frequencies up in the chain to make a kick drum A, cut through, B, sound good and not like it's you're dropping a box of crackers on the floor, and C, that won't sound totally out of place in a song. So you have to experiment with the kick drum sounds alone in the song, and believe me, hours and hours and hours of experimenting. Making a kick drum louder does not make it better in the mix, we'll say. I found with the frequency canceling of these instruments, the bass drum will get sucked out almost all the time. It will sound like the kick drum is not there. And if you have it by itself, the kick drum is like wow, what a great sound. But the other instruments are fighting it. So I bring back this issue of phasing. It's very similar to phasing. So when two mics are out of phase, like say on your kick drum, the kick drum will sound more slappy rather than punchy. Okay? It'll sound more papery than thuddy. So that's why I experiment with the phasing. So with the EQing, you can almost think of it as phasing until you find out where the frequencies really smash together and how you can divide that area up and make it pleasing for all the instruments. Now, I would lie and say that I'm a pro at that, but I am not. But what I am is an experimentalist, and I will spend 8 hours upon 8 hours upon 8 hours upon 8 hours doing my re-EQing to make things work. So it doesn't cost me anything because it's my own studio, so time is not money. So anyways, that's the scoop on that EQing thing and the blending of items, of instruments. And we can see also, here we go, we're going to show the vocal area. The vocal is just in the tinge of that same area, but still in the 50 to 100 range. The toms, they really get in here. So sometimes rolling this off even more is better. And you look at your snare drum. The snare drum just cuts in. The reason why the snare drum cuts in is like a vocal. It's not in the, they're not in the 60 between 60 and 80K is where a bass drum, normal bass drums live. Unless you're running a bigger bass drum, like I have a 26-inch Slingerland, and it's got some pretty cool low frequencies, so it's by itself. So it in those lower frequencies, so it actually shines through. But so the 50 to 100K area is definitely the fighting zone for everything you record. So experiment with that area if you're not getting the desired effect. Now I know a lot of people going back to drums, you know, if you're not a drummer, then the drums are, well, I don't care what I use, I'll use program tracks and all this other stuff. It's like, well, that's fine and dandy, but eventually you're going to get tired of, you know, going through catalogs of drum beats, and you'll want something spicy and something that's off the cuff, and you're not going to find it because you haven't worked with a real drummer or a real drum set. So being a drummer, I experiment with everything to do with the drum set, everything to do with everything else, because I play the other instruments too. So it's basically it's a madness, an addiction and a madness to find the tweaks to make things sound better, and it's never ending. You will always continue to research. I can't think of anything else somebody asked. It's for the vocal. Yeah, someone asked about vocal. They didn't notice the vocal booth. I have a portable vocal booth that's half mooned, I guess you'd say. That's on 2 stands. It's out in the other room right now. I'm changing the foam on it. I had regular foam just to deaden it. A friend of mine gave me acoustic foam that I'm going to be putting up in parts of the studio. Not that I need it, the room's dead, but where my speakers are for my rig, we've been experimenting. So behind the console here, there's going to be a beam of foam, or not a beam, but aluminum rod with foam panels attached to it, and it's going to V out in behind the speakers. I've experimented with it, and I really like the sound I'm getting there. It's up the ante a little bit on what I'm hearing. So I'm quite happy the way the studio turned out. I'm still trying to dial in final mixes. I'm getting there. I've got 2 computers I do mixing on. I've got this one here, and I've got a whole rig upstairs with studio monitors. So I have 2 different rooms to mix in, and they're different. So what I do is try both rooms, trying to see if one complements the other. If not, find out where I can tweak, and then I'll run and put it through my stereo, my car stereo, and everyone has to do that to try and get it right. It's magical when you get something right. It's horribly frustrating when you can't dial something in, and you will come across that. I've come across that with kick drums and acoustic guitars. The 2 hardest things I think to get right. But I will get better at it. I'm pretty close on the bass drums and the acoustics, but still could be better. As for the drums, real drums here. The odd time if I do use a sequence track, it's for a demo, and real drums will be added to it later. But real drums here, it's like I've got so many drum sets to choose from vintage ones to newer ones to weird ones. There's no way I'm going to be recording synthetic drums. Ain't gonna happen. So learn to get a sound out of acoustic drums. The payoff in the end is fantastic. If you want to trigger drums, that's totally fine. It's just not my cup of tea. So anyways, hopefully I got everything. I'm trying to think. I can't think of anything else. Oh, yes, one other thing. They asked about the monitors, why I do not run 2 monitors. And what they were basically asking is, I'm going to shut this off here for a sec. And I'm going to close this down. They saw me switching between screens to track view, which is where all the audio tracks are, and console view, which is basically looking at a soundboard, electronic soundboard. Well, the reason why I don't run 2 monitors for that purpose is because I am running a second monitor at the drum set. So I had to sacrifice. I couldn't run 3 monitors, and I don't really need to run 3 monitors. I'm quite happy flicking the switch back and forth. It doesn't bother me in the least. But I definitely needed a monitor on the drum set, because when I'm recording by myself, I have to be able to see and control the software from behind the drum set. And I did a video showing how I do that with a wireless mouse and keyboards that's set up back there. So I'm doing everything myself, every single thing with my original materials. So, and even when my writing partner Tony is not here, I can do editing and redoing drums, because I redid a drum track on one of our old songs, because I only had a guide drum track, which was just straight beat. I played all the way through just to help everybody line up, and then I wanted to come up with a different drum part later on. So in that case, I just still did it by myself using the remote keyboard and mouse and secondary monitor. It's great to have 2 monitors up to do all that stuff. There's no problem with it. I think everybody should use it. In my situation, that second monitor behind my drum set is more important. So, and sure, I could set up more monitors. It already sucks enough power here, so I really don't need it. But anyways, thanks for asking all the questions in my message box, and any more, just feel free. I love the yapping, as you know. Peace. Take it easy, guys.